morning. I am going to do this in English. I'm sorry. If the Dutch national team would have won last night against the Deutsche Mannschaft, I would have done it in German. But we tied. So I do apologize for the performance of last night, by the way, but I'm sure you guys thought you were going to win, and we were sure we were going to lose. So something went wrong there in the planning. So my name is Ruud van Hilten. As you can see, I'm Dutch. I'm from the Netherlands. I've lived outside the country for pretty much all of my life, which means that English is pretty much my first language. So apologize for that. I'm in compliance, which is a scary area. I'll be talking about tax a little bit. I will not be spending the whole morning talking about tax. I only have half an hour. I need to be between these two because of the camera. So if you see me move here, it's because of the camera. I'll be talking about tax a little bit. Now, being in compliance has its own specific challenges, both professional, as I will show you in a second, but also personally. If you are in compliance, you are never getting invited for birthday parties because you talk about tax all the time. Nobody wants to sit next to you. So, and I like these summits because you can't really easily leave because that feels bad. So you'll have to stick with me for the next 30 minutes, I guess. But what I will be talking about is compliance in context of business. So yes, I'll be talking about tax and what's happening in the world, but I'll definitely also be talking about how you fit that into a business context. You're here in Germany, in Düsseldorf, and there's lots of companies out here who will tell you how they can do Zukunft and Rechnung wonderfully for you. And I'm going to tell you right here and right now, it doesn't matter. That's not what your business is going to benefit from. A business benefits from decision making and business process automation and improvement. It doesn't really benefit from compliance. I know I'm not doing justice to my own trade, but a business doesn't grow because you comply. A business grows because you're on a journey, as you can see there, by driving cost out of manual process or because you want to optimize your cash flow. I'll give an example in a little bit later, or perhaps because you want to get insights from your data, your day-to-day, information that will allow you to take better decisions. That's what you're here to do. That's your promise to shareholders, to customers, your own staff and yourself. That's what a business is for, not to comply. Is there anybody here who started a business to be compliant? No, I didn't think so. So compliance is important, tax is important, but it's not why you exist. Now, I speak to lots of customers on a daily basis. I run a strategy team inside Tungsten Automation, and I always ask them, so what are your main challenges when it comes to invoice automation, inbound and outbound? And there's a number of things that we probably all recognize. We can't find enough people with the right talent and the right skills, so we move our operations around the world trying to find better people, more skill sets, better education. We're also under tremendous pressure from competition and disruptors, new entries to the market, to remove manual processes, to drive the cost out, and our supply chains are under constant pressure as well. There's always somebody who can find a cheaper supplier out there, or a new supplier that will do things completely differently, and you are getting disrupted. And one of the worst ones, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, is clearance. Government mandates, government obligations to use electronic invoicing, which must be a headache for many of you here. So I'll talk about that a little bit, and I'll talk a bit about impact of new technologies or artificial intelligence. But I only have 30 minutes, so I'll need to be quick. So let's talk about clearance mandates. What is a clearance mandate really? It means that a government is forcing suppliers in their own economy to submit their invoices to the government platform, a government platform, before they can actually send it to the buyer. And sometimes it's the government themselves that send it to the buyer. That sounds weird. It sounds unnatural, but it happens. It happens in Italy. It happens in Romania. It will happen in France. It will also happen in Poland. And there's many more countries that are on the journey to go there. Today there are about 50 countries that have a regime like that, and most of these are found in Latin America. Because Latin America has very large, what we call informal economies, i.e. tax evasion. And this is ink blotting really rapidly. This is spreading around the world really rapidly, and it's inevitable. We think, and not just us, Gartner too, believes that by 2030, about 60% of all economies in the world will have adopted a form of clearance, a form of a fiscal regime where the invoice needs to go to the government before it can be sent to the buyer. And by the way, Germany is on the same trajectory. By 2027, invoices in Germany need to be structured. They need to be compliant with the EN 16931 norm, European standard. And the first phase of that starts in 2025, in about 4 months. I'll tell you a little bit more about that too. So with this happening, this will lead to huge disruption in businesses. Why? Because tax is complicated. Tax is really difficult. If you look at what you're all doing today, and we do the same in the Netherlands and in the UK, where I usually live, or in Sweden or in Denmark or in Belgium, we're all doing the same thing. We are reporting our VAT on a monthly basis by showing our sales and our purchases, and the government will make some sort of an interpretation of how much money you owe them, or how much money they owe you, depending on how your business works. But governments are under tremendous pressure. They're dealing with a housing crisis, a healthcare crisis, aging population, climate change, which is extremely expensive. And they need more money, and there's something else which is called a VAT gap. That is the amount of money governments are expecting to collect but never get. Usually they don't get it because of tax evasion, misclassification of transactions. But whatever the cause is, they're not getting it. That's the whole reason why governments want to see invoices before they are sent to the buyer, because then they can register the tax and they are not reliant on you reporting these transactions. So governments want more data. They want it across more documents. Many governments now pull in waybills, Lieferscheine. They put in credit notes. They want to see cross-border transactions or consumer transactions or employee expenses, as well as everything else that you do. It needs to be really detailed, and it needs to be always there. And that's why governments are moving to these mandates. And that's actually what's going to happen is that they have the data. They have your invoices. It means that they are not reliant on you. They will tell you how much money you owe them or how much money they owe you. So that leads to the following capabilities for any government. You get audited all the time. The other thing is that whatever networks you use for purchase orders and potentially for EDI transactions or e-invoicing or any other types of networks like transportation networks, you'll need to somehow create visibility across all these different networks to ensure that you can actually deal with this. Pre-filled tax returns. A pre-filled tax return is that the government will just tell you at the end of the month that this is how much money you owe me. And if you want to challenge the government, which is difficult under the best of circumstances, you need to have your house in order. You need to know where your data is, and you need to see it across networks. Sounds very logical. I think if you look at the VAT gap in Europe, which is 90 billion euros, so in Europe, in the European Union alone, the uncollected tax is 90 billion. Just imagine what we could do with that money. That's how many hospitals and roads and you can build and care homes and whatever else, but the money's still not there. So that's why they are doing this. The trouble is that no government is going around this in the same way. I've taken a bit of a cross-section through Europe. And I'm just opening this up. So you've got Germany and Belgium, Poland and Romania and France. Each of these countries has already implemented clearance, where the invoice needs to go to the government. Romania, for instance, is one of these countries, which started doing this in July 1st, just barely a month ago. And then Germany, of course, is on this path to electronic invoicing. With the first stage in 2025, in 4 months' time, where if suppliers decide to send you a European norm invoice, as a buyer, as a receiver, you must accept that invoice. Even though you cannot handle the format, you have no idea how to process it, you must accept it. The German government has not specified whether it needs to be in a certain format. They have not specified how the invoice needs to be delivered to the buyer. They say that email is a really good alternative. Now, for anybody who has been in accounts payable processing, anybody who's been there knows that invoices attached to an email are a nightmare. Very, very difficult to process. But that's what the German government says. By 2027, invoices must be in that format. And then at some point, the German government will introduce their government platform, where invoices need to flow through. So Germany is following a different path to exactly the same stage. Whereas Belgium is going through something completely different, and so is Poland. Poland will have a central distribution system called KSEF that you need to be connected to, submit your invoices to, and they will submit the invoice to the buyer. You are not sending your invoice to the buyer. Completely different from what Germany is doing and what Belgium is doing, and on and on and on. And then France, oh dear. I mean, I'm not taking a stab at the French here, but somebody has had a field day with PowerPoint and just started drawing arrows and just think, oh, well, there's an arrow possible here. It's the most complex mandate I have ever seen, and I've been in this industry for 20 years. I've never seen anything like it. 2026, France will happen for the largest companies in the country. But the story here is that it doesn't stop there. There's more countries coming. Italy already has it. But then Spain will also move in 2026. We'll see Ireland on the same path, as well as Sweden and so many more. And at some point, it will become inevitable because your competition and your competitive position with countries around you that are using electronic invoice changes dramatically. You'll simply have to do it, and you will want to do it. But the way countries are going about this and governments are going about this create chaos. It's incredibly difficult if you are a multinational company to deal with all these different regimes and to understand exactly what they do. So that is horribly confusing. And it distracts you and your business and your IT departments from what you are here to do. To grow your business, to create value for your customers and your shareholders, to be a nice place to work in for your employees. You want to do all these things, that's what you're here to do as a business, but you can't. Because you need to do what the government wants you to do, comply. And we already concluded earlier that there's no company here that started its life because they want to be compliant. It doesn't make any sense. So you need to find a way to solve that puzzle between your business objectives, whatever it is that you are trying to achieve as a company, and whatever the government wants you to do. Much more so than today. And we need to remember, and I hear these stories from government agencies all the time, that say, well, but we're trying to encourage digitization. We're trying to make things more digital, and we're trying to help companies drive electronic business. But we need to remember that a compliant invoice is not a good invoice. It can be a horrible invoice. All it does is it complies with the government regulations. But the government doesn't care about your purchase order compliance or your straight-through processing. They don't care about your payment terms. What they care about is the tax money, and they should. You care about straight-through processing, efficient process, and being able to pay your suppliers on time. That's what you care about. So how do you bring this puzzle together? First, by recognizing that you are on a journey and identifying for yourself, where am I on that journey? I'll give you one example. You may be wanting to optimize your cash flow. Now, we're in an accounting summit, and if you ask people here what that means, cash flow optimization, it may mean margin optimization, it may mean so many other things. But it may also mean that you want to move parts of your operation to a supply chain in another country, even seasonally, because it just makes sense. They're cheaper, better, more modern, whatever they are. And then you find that in that country, very, very complex rules apply. What does that do? Basically two things. On the one hand, it may simply distract you so much that you never get to what you wanted to do. Or it just stops you from doing it altogether because it's too scary. And that's where e-invoicing providers like ourselves come in. That's our job, to solve that for you. So you need to find a way to solve that puzzle between your business objectives and the government requirements. And what are the requirements that you need to look at when you are making a selection of how are you going to be moving forward into the future for accounts receivable and accounts payable. First of all, anything you choose, and this is such a no-brainer, but I'm going to say it anyway because I needed 5 bullets, but it needs to be future-proof. It doesn't just need to work today, it needs to work tomorrow, and in 5 or 6 years, well, the whole world explodes into clearance mandates. It needs to be ready to do that. But it also needs to support your business objectives. If it just helps you comply, what have you gained? Nothing. So if you come away here, after this 2-day session and tonight's happy hour, I think I saw, and you may even win a prize here. But if you come away from these 2 days thinking like, I have found somebody who can do my Zukunft and my X-Rechnung perfectly, you've made a mistake. You need to find somebody who can do that perfectly and help your business objectives. The second thing is that you need to look beyond compliance. It's not just about compliance. It's not just about VAT either. We don't have time to go into that today, but I'm around all day, and please come to our booth, which by the way is I3 or E03. Because I want to talk to you about ESG, environmental, social responsibility and governance taxation. Incredibly important. That goes beyond VAT, but that will happen too. Plastic tax, carbon tax, fat tax, sugar tax, all these things are happening. And that's leaving alone anti-slavery and all sorts of other things. Then we know one thing, learned from Italy, that once a government has implemented a clearance mandate, they will continue to make changes. Italy didn't really make any change in their VAT system until 2019. Between 1979 and 2019, they hardly made any changes. From 2019 to today, they made 50 changes. That's a lot. Some of them were small, some of them were really, really large and led to very large projects. So not only do you need to be ready for today, and that's what I also mean with future-proof, but you need a solution that will help you isolate yourself or insulate yourself from that ongoing change, which is incredibly difficult to do. I'll speed up a bit. If you are trading in multiple countries, and I guess many of you are, let's see a show of hands. How many of you are trading in more than one country, not just Germany alone? There's nothing to be ashamed of, it's a good thing. Many of you. It means that you'll be facing at least one of these regimes. Somebody in your organization will have to deal with what's going on in one of these countries. The worst thing you can do is to pick solutions that are country specific. If you have to operate a system, a solution in every country individually, you're making a terrible mistake. Your cost will go through the roof. And your company will be continuously distracted. That's not what you want. And last, you need to go for data. If you remember what I said earlier about the government knowing more than you do, and they will know more than you do because they see every single one of your transactions. They know what you sell, they know what you buy, they know the cost, they know when you do it, they know your discount rates, they know who you buy from. And they have really good artificial intelligence to analyze that information. Of course, we trust the government to do the right thing with that information, but what if they came with a tax return that we don't like? How are we going to challenge them? So one thing that you need is consistently best data. You need to find a way to marry all your systems and to have visibility through all your networks, through all your transactions. That's also where your solutions should support you. Now, I do work for a company, so I do need to advertise at least one of our solutions, which I'll do really, really briefly. That's exactly what was the starting point for a solution that we call invoice agility. This is a beautiful word for a big bucket that will take in any invoice. I'll get there in a second. But what I said earlier, you need to find a way to marry your business objectives, what you try to achieve as a company, with what the government requires you to do. And it sounds simple and it sounds oh so logical, but that's not what most companies are doing. So that puzzle you need to solve. And how you do that is you need to find a way to have one solution, one ingestion point for all your invoices. Regardless of whether they're on paper, on PDF, if they came in through EDI or a network or potentially call it an open framework like PEPL. you need to be ready to deal with all of these, because this is how suppliers will be sending invoices to you. They will. They have that opportunity. They will do it. So, and then that information needs to be processed into a consistent payload into your workflow, your corporate applications, or your ERPs. I'm not going to tell you here exactly how that works. That will take way too long, and frankly, is horribly boring, is very technical. Let's talk about file formats and connecting systems together. What I'm telling you here is this is what you need. You need to find yourself a suite of capabilities that can deal with all these different file formats and all these different countries where the requirements are wildly different. We call it invoice agility. That's exactly what it does. And don't underestimate that last step of consistent data into your ERP or your workflow environment. You'll need that when you are discussing with the government who know more than you do. That brings me to discussing one more little point, and that is the impact of technologies. I cannot stand here and not talk about artificial intelligence. I woke up this morning and I switched on the TV channels, and of course it was all in German, but I wanted to see how Donald Trump did against Kamala Harris, but instead I got to see an advert for a toothbrush that had AI technology in it. How does that work? A toothbrush that has AI technology in it? Well, I tell you, the moment I need to reboot my toothbrush, that's the moment I stop using it. I've also seen hand warmers with AI technology in it. So you put your hand in it and then it does what exactly? There's an AI engine that goes into a large language model, analyzes it, and then warms my hand exactly the way I want it. That's not how AI should work. But I've got a question for you. And I know you're not going to answer that here because people don't like to stand up and say something. But if you think about AI in financial process automation, aren't the first words that spring to mind is like maybe, promising, scary? Because at the end of the day, we are financial process automation people, many of you are, and I heard the word controlling and accounting, black and white, right? On or off, you comply or you don't. And then having a generative AI in the middle scares the bejesus out of most people, doesn't it? Or do you all think that, I see you nodding no. It's great, fantastic. So come and talk to us later because I want to know how you do that. Most of us find it really scary. So when we did some research into what do people believe is the best use case of AI in financial process automation, invoice automation, this is the use case most people came up with. Not so much decisioning around tax code derivation, even though that is a really good use case. And I've got friends here who will tell you tomorrow that's the best use case ever. But there are other areas where you simply can have a very simple, and you'll see there it is, you'll see a little running animation that shows how you can have a natural language conversation with data, your invoice data. We've added that to that invoice agility thing I showed you earlier. It allows you to ask questions about, how many invoices did we get from this supplier? What was the average value? What currency were these invoices in? I mean, things that managers sometimes want to know. You've already extracted the data, it's ready for processing, but then people start asking questions. You can rebuild the report you're getting by saying, add a column, add a line, do this, do that, without generating another report. You don't need to go to anybody in your IT department to rebuild a large report for you. You just ask the data. That's what AI does. How many of this, how many of that? Please show me another view on the data myself in natural language. So you don't need to be a coder, you don't need to know SQL, you don't need to go to the IT department to build you another report. You can just get it from here, and that's how that works. So the demo keeps on running. I think we also have it running on our booth, but we've added this capability so that we can allow people to gain insight from their own data. And rest assured, we're not using anybody else's data, it's just your data, and we're also not using your data to train other language models. It's your data. I want to make that really, really clear. If there's an accountant in the room, they'll catch me immediately if I didn't say that. So where that leads you to, and I'm clicking, here we go. what we have done in Invoice Agility, we didn't want to stop at that capability of taking in any invoice through any channel in any way possible and getting it ready for the for the ERP and the cockpit and the workflow environment. We've added document AI and generative AI together so that you can get better insights. And actually, if you remember that journey curve that I showed you earlier, there was one in business agility, getting insights and driving my business better. That's exactly what this does for you. It drives creativity, it drives efficiency, but also it frees up time. That's why we did this. If you embrace this philosophy, and of course we'd love you to do that with tungsten automation, but if you just embrace the philosophy, this will help you do a number of things. One is that it will stop you being distracted constantly by the next thing the government has come up with. It will allow you to focus what you are good at as a business. It will allow you to comply. Of course, without compliance you can't really work. It's a necessary evil. But it will allow you to focus on your business objectives. But the most important thing it does is it will help you build the data and have the visibility of the data that you need in the face of a government that knows more than you do. And with that, we have 2 minutes left for questions, remarks, comments. She promised me she would look at me really, really angrily if I didn't stop in time, and I did.
Thank you. And we have just one question at this moment, and the question is, what regime applies in B2B cases such as reverse charge? The regime of the service provider or the service recipient, or both?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I think I know where it comes from. That really depends on the country. So it depends on where the reverse charge is happening and where the charge is reversed. Reverse charge, as you know, is services where the buyer pays the VAT on behalf of the supplier. That happens, and that's a European mechanism to make sure that taxes actually do get paid. That's such a detailed question. I will invite that person. He's now walking there. I will invite that person to come over. But typically, that would be done in the country where the mandate applies. So that will be the country of the supplier.
Thank you for this moment. If there are more questions, you can find Ruth in the booth I03, E03 is der Stand. And I say thank you, Ruth.